Today, I want to share with you two amazing resources. One is for young children that you would read with them discussing truth and feelings and the difference between feelings and truth. The other is a resource for you as a Christian parent to discuss some of the more challenging conversations and topics surrounding sexuality and gender that are really needed conversations that we have to have with our kids in today's culture. Hi, and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. If you are new to my channel, I am a homeschooling mom of three. I have a kindergartner, first grader, and a toddler. I am also a second generation homeschooler, and so this channel is just my outlet for everything homeschool research, curriculum, resources, scheduling ideas, you name it, anything homeschool. If this is the kind of content you like, go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. But today I'm going to be sharing with you two resources from Foundation Worldview. These are resources that I've had my eye on. One is brand new and the other came out recently. And I was interested in maybe incorporating into our homeschool year next year. So I reached out to the company and asked if they would be willing to send me a copy of these so that I could share them with you. And they said yes. So a big thank you to Foundation Worldview. These are not their only resources, by the way. And while I have not seen all of their stuff, so I can't put a big stamp of approval on everything, I have seen quite a few of the YouTube videos that the founder of this resource has put out, and I will link her channel below. They also have a curriculum online that's like a video curriculum that discusses some of these topics with kids that I have seen like the samples of, and I've seen a lot of people recommend. I will link that below as well, so you can check out all the resources if these are interesting to you. I'll also link directly to both of these books that I'm about to show you. So I'm going to show you the first one, which is about feelings and truth for young kids that you would read with them, and then in the second half of the video, I will show you the other resource that is for you as a parent to talk about some of the challenging topics surrounding gender and sexuality. So I will try to put a timestamp in the middle, so if you're interested in one or the other, you can look at that particular spot. But let's just jump in. This first set is two little books, picture book style. What is truth and are feelings truth? These, I would say, after reading through them, are geared towards ages 3 to 6. I read them with my 5 and my 6-year-old, and I would say they were just kind of capping out at my 6-year-old level. She did get something out of them. They both really enjoyed them, but I would say not much above that as far as age range. And what they are is there are these two little monsters that go through a brief conversation on what is truth, and then they have your child be like, they ask them questions. Is it true that this is true, or is it not true? And your child goes, true or not true or whatever. And my kids had fun. I did see some complaints online that people didn't like the artwork in these, the monsters. They felt they would have been better as people. My kids had no problem. They thought they were funny and clever, and I think they're supposed to be engaging that way. I really like these. I thought they were a very, very basic conversation starter. So I would say reading this with your kids, and then don't end there. Like, continue the conversation throughout the day of, oh, is this true or is this not true? Oh, is this truth or is this not true? My kids knew what was in this book already. We've had some of these conversations, so none of this was groundbreaking for them. It was more of a reminder and then, like I said, a conversation opener. However, when we got to this second book in the series, Our Feelings Truth, we kind of dudded out a little bit on what my kids knew. So it was a good book for us to have read, and we will read it again. And like I said, it's a good conversation opener because now we can have this conversation in terms that we've already talked about. So when we got to Our Feelings Truth, my kids were like, yeah, feelings are true. What I feel is true. I was like, all right, we need to have a conversation. And then we're like, they have some more of those questions. Is this a feeling or is this a truth? So I think the first question is like, is it true that the sun can shine during the day for me, but not for you? And my younger daughter was like, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. And so we had to talk about that a little bit. Or some of the more tricky ones that, like, one of them is, puppies are fun. Is that a feeling or a truth? And my kids were like, oh, that's totally true. I'm like, well, actually, that's how you feel about puppies. That's the conversation in the book. That's how you feel about puppies, but not everybody loves puppies. So the fact that puppies are fun is how you feel. It's not an inherent truth about puppies. Now, some of you might disagree. Puppies might, in your mind, be inherently fun. Again, very basic, but just an easy conversation to miss and important information. Like, it's very important for our kids to recognize truth from not truth, and it's very important for them to know the difference between feelings and truth. Now, if you are not a Christian and the Bible is not your source of truth, then the ending of the books you will not like. The very ending references something biblical or have a scripture verse that they reference talking about God. So, for instance, in the Is It Feelings or Truth, the very final one is God is love, referencing the scripture verse talking about it, talking about how our feelings don't change the truth about God and Him being loving. If you are not a Christian, then this resource is probably not geared toward you. So, putting that out there. But I like them. I found them fun. I found them enjoyable. I found them short and easy to read. It didn't take a lot of my time. It was like a 5-minute read, and my kids enjoyed them. And like I said, this is not like, tons of information, but it's a good conversation starter, a good place for you to start with your kids and then continue from there, discussing feelings and truth. So that is those two. Okay, now, this next one might have a little bit more discussion surrounding it. It's going to take me a little bit longer to talk through. Helping your kids Know God's Good Design. 40 questions and answers on sexuality and gender. Again, upfront, this is biblically based. If you are not based in the Bible in your beliefs, then this will not be for you. It will not be helpful because they really are coming at everything from a super biblical worldview. They reference tons of scriptures. They are pulling in God's design for our sexuality, really focusing heavily on the good part of his design, and then answering questions going from there. The design is good, and we've broken his design. They really, really focus on that, and I really appreciate that. I see that as super valuable for your kids. So let me just read the back, and then I want to talk to you about it a little bit, and then I'm going to open it up and actually read you the titles of all the chapters because I think that will help you know if this is something that would be helpful for you in conversations, or these conversations you want to have with your kids, and they are. So the back just says, in today's pervasively secular culture, it's more essential than ever to guide your children toward a biblical worldview on all issues, including complex topics of sexuality and gender. But as a parent, how do you have these discussions in an informed, age-appropriate, and Christ-centered way? This how-to handbook equips you to talk about sex, gender, and the Bible with your children between the ages of 4 and 12 with confidence and nuance. Inside, you'll find biblically grounded answers to some of Christians' parents' most common questions. Now, I have not read 100% of this. I think I've read about half. I read the first third straight through, and then I've jumped around to some of the topics that I found interesting to me. I do plan to finish reading it all the way through and then to use this as a handbook. So the way it's done, I think you would gain great value as a parent reading it all the way through so you can kind of understand their whole overview, their whole view on it. But then it's definitely a resource that you could go topic by topic as topics come up, or conversations with your kids, or specific conversations that you want to have with them. The goal in this book is to have these conversations with your kids be very approachable, very biblical based, very unintimidating. They give you specific verses to talk to. They give you direct quotes for some of the conversations that are uncomfortable for you, right? The sex talk is not like one that we all love to have. So they give you some very, like, just say it like this. Exactly, use these words, right? So they're really trying to make it easy for you as a parent. And now they can't take away all the awkwardness or your job as a parent to have further follow-up conversations, but they give you a good place to start, and they really give you something just to take hold of and run with. Also, the chapters in this are super short and easy to read. They go between 2 to 6 pages, like front and back, so 1 to 3 pages entirely in the chapters. They're not long, lengthy. They really take a bite size. So again, it's easy to read through, but it's also easy to just look at one section and go through it and then use those resources in conversations for your kids. This is not for you to hand to your kids or to read to your kids. This is for you as the parent to read up and then go have the hard conversations with your kids. Like I said, I've read about half of this, and I can't put my 100% stamp of approval on everything because I haven't read everything, but of what I've read, there have only been 1 or 2 small differences that I've come up with. And since this is for me as a parent, that's not an issue. One of the topics, there was 3 points that she brought up, and one of them I was like, my husband and I read it with him, and we were like, we don't really quite see it like that, the biblical interpretation of where she was going. So we would just leave out that third point in the conversation, but we would totally use her other points in the conversation that she was making. So it's really easy for you if there's something that you disagree with, since this is for you as a parent, you can edit it to match your belief system. You will not be able to edit the Bible out of this. So if you are not, like I said, biblically founded, then you won't be able to do that. This is all biblically founded. So one of their premises in this book is that you want to be the first person to have the sex talks with your kid. Talk about all these hard and uncomfortable conversations for a couple of reasons. One is kind of the not the rule, but the idea that the first person your kids hear a topic from, they generally view that person or that source as an authority. The first time you hear something, that's kind of your founding in that. And the first way you hear it spoken of, negative, positive, crude, will kind of attach itself to the way you think about the topic. And so you need to be the first person that your kids talk to so that they view you as one of the authorities on it, and so that you can have a say in how they perceive it, how their initial responses to it are. And they always, in all of these conversations, come at it first from the perspective of what is God's design for us. And God has made a really good design. So they always talk about the positive first. The positive that sex is made for marriage and the good things that it does in marriage before they go to the topic of, sinful acts of sex or sin in sex and some of the things that come to that. So they always start from the good and God's good design and then show how we are breaking God's design. And so we are not using it the way it was meant to be. And therefore there are these problems. I really like that. I really like the positive because I think it's so easy. Especially in our generation mind where I grew up, there was a lot of purity talk and a lot of stay away from talk, but there wasn't a lot of talk about how good it was. Like, God made this. It's not something sinful if you use it right? But we never talked about the good part. We saw the bad part, or we were told to stay away from the bad part. And then in Hollywood and social media and pop culture, we saw the bad parts. But nobody really showed you the good part and what it was actually made for and why God had designed it the way he had designed it. So I really, really like that focus of helping your kids understand what is good about it before you start discussing the things that they need to avoid or the things that are pitfalls for them. And that is the other reason I want you to discuss it before anybody else, is so that they recognize things when they come up against them and so that they know how to respond. They try to help your kids with answers and ways to respond to people who want to show them inappropriate pictures. They give your child a phrase that you should teach them to memorize. This is what you say, so that you have a response and your kid isn't just like deer in the headlight, don't know what to say in these scenarios. So it's really trying to prepare your children well. And I really appreciate that. Okay, so their main premise on sexuality, and I will just read it directly from, I marked a page that I felt like wrote it down, is one, marriage is a lifelong covenant between one man and one woman. God designed sex as a good gift in marriage for intimacy and the creation of children. All forms of sex outside a one man and one woman marriage covenant are sin. So that is the premise on sexuality in this book. So if you don't agree with that, this book isn't for you. But if you do, then they have another section that I wanted to read directly because I felt like it was good and just kind of hearing where they're coming from and how they're approaching things. And it's what I was talking about, how my generation, at least I feel like me and a lot of my friends, were told a lot of things not to do, but not a lot of the good things. And so it's, if we want our children to embrace God's good design for sex, we must do more than lay down the law and follow it up with threats, right? You can't just tell our kids don't do this. Instead, we must help them understand the truth, goodness, and beauty of God's design. I believe that in doing so, involves three distinct steps. One, link sex to the concept of design. Two, show that God's design is always good. And three, highlight the practical goodness of reserving sex for marriage. That's, again, kind of their premises on sex, and the premise that most of these conversations that they have in here for you to have with your kids are based on these things. I like that. I think those are solid. I think those are super helpful. They also focus a lot on humans as the image bearer of God. So one of the reasons you would stay away from making pictures of people is because we are not treating the people in those images as image bearers of our creator, of God. We are using them as objects. And so they bring that in. They also bring that in the nuances, I believe, of like the talk about like, how do you feel about your own body, teaching kids to view their bodies well, right? That we are also image bearers of God. And so we need to treat and use our bodies correctly. They have a whole topic on helping your kids know how to deal with other people who are dealing with sexual sin or coming out or all these things that we're running up against. And she has a 3-step process that she uses to walk your child through it. She gives a lot more information in this. I'm just trying to give you kind of a feel for this book a little bit. One is recognize that what they are dealing with, their friends or the people they're running up to, are not doing God's good design. 2, remind yourself or remind your child of the truth about it. And then 3, be kind to people. Like, we are to recognize truth. We are to say it as it is, but we are also not called to be rude or mean to people. We are to be kind. Like, what kind of gospel is not kindness? Now, I don't believe that means we have to be pushovers and agree with everybody and not say what is true, but we can also be kind about it. And so those are their steps that they kind of encourage your children to think through as they're discussing some of these issues. I am thinking for myself of using this specifically. I'm thinking of like incorporating it next year. I want to say into our homeschool, but we won't be doing it during our homeschool day. But I'm going to try to take like 20 of these conversations or topics and schedule them throughout the year, the school year. Not to have during our school day per se, but to be intentional about having over the course of a week or a week and a half when the opportunity arises. Trying to make it more natural, not like sit down, let's have this conversation, but looking for opportunities to bring this specific topic in and talk about it with my kids. Because I think if I sit down, I'm like, yeah, I know I want to have that conversation with my kid, but it's so easy to forget and not have it, or to not know how to have it, or just not to think about all the nuances involved. And so I'm going to go through this and pull about 20 conversations that I want to have and schedule them in over the calendar year, just to be intentional this week to find a time for this conversation. And then use her resource, study up, think about it before I have the conversation. So to be a prayer. So I'm going to use this kind of as a guideline of things that I want to discuss with my kids. Okay, now what I want to do is I just want to open this up and read the titles of all their sections. They have 5 main sections, I think. Yeah, 5 main sections. And then between those 5 main sections, there's 40 different conversations or topics that they cover. Heads up, if you have little kids in the room, these will have words that whether or not, I don't know, you want your kids to know. You may want to put in earbuds or you may not care, but it's up to you. I'm just giving you a warning before I start reading the topics off to you. Okay. So we have our introduction and our foundation, what is God's good design for sex? And then part 1 is how and when to talk about sex. When should I first have the sex talks with my child? What should I cover when I talk with my child about sex? Does it matter which parent gives the sex talk? How do I overcome feeling embarrassed or unprepared to have these conversations? What if I've waited too long to have the initial sex talk? So that's part one. Part two is teaching biblical views on sexuality. So, how do I explain sexual sin to my children? How do I help my child understand why sex is only for marriage? How can I help my child think biblically about their body? How do I talk to my child about the negative consequences of sex outside of marriage? How do I explain divorce to my child? How do I talk with my child about masturbation from a biblical perspective? How do I talk to my child about pornography? How do I talk to my child about what the Bible teaches about homosexuality? How do I talk to my child about what the Bible teaches about gender identity and transgenderism? So that is part two. Give me a second. My throat's a little rough. Okay. So part three is addressing anxieties and fears. How do I handle the fear that I'll have these conversations the wrong way? Will talking with my child about sex at a young age steal their innocence? How do I discuss sexual purity without making my child feel shame or guilt? How do I help my child not buy into the lie that the Bible's teaching on sexual morality is oppressive and evil? How do I help my child understand that feelings don't dictate sexual morality? Am I hypocritical if I teach my child the biblical desire for sex even though I didn't follow it? How honest should I be with my child about my past sexual sin? What can I do to help protect my child from sexual abuse? And what do I need to teach my child about consent? Super practical, and some of these may be more applicable for you than others, but again, these are things that once you've read through and understand the premises, you can jump topics. Okay, part four. When loved ones are living outside of God's design. And I think this is one that a lot of us will run into. But the sections in here are, how do I teach my child to love others without affirming another person's sin? How should I guide my child if their friend comes out as gay, lesbian, or transgender? How should I guide my child if a family member enters a sex-same relationship? How should I explain to my child why we are not attending a loved one's same-sex wedding? How do I prepare my child to interact with a family member or friend who's in transitioning? How do I explain why it's not okay for a couple to live together before they're married? How do I teach my child about God's grace without giving them license for sexual sin? Okay, so and then part five, everyday questions and conversations. Should I teach my child slang words related to sex and body parts before they hear them from others? How should I explain sexually charged terms like hot and sexy? How should I address my young child masturbating? Is a boy wearing a dress the same as a girl wearing pants? Is it okay for my child to pretend to be the opposite sex when playing dress up? How can I encourage my child who doesn't fit in with traditional gender norms? How do I encourage sexual modesty in my child without introducing shame? What should I do when my child develops a crush? What do I do about the library having so many books promoting LGBTQ plus ideology? And what guardrails should I put in place when it comes to books, TV, internet, and other media? Okay, these are super applicable, and I'm not going to claim that you will agree with their stance on everything. I mean, each of us has a slightly different stance on these, but these are really good talking points, and she really does try to come at it from a biblical perspective. And if nothing else, it'll give you something to think about as you have these conversations. Even if, like I said, there's one that we differ on, but it was an interesting thought and something for me to consider. And some of the other things that she pointed out are things that I wouldn't have thought to bring in, but I think are really valid. So I am really excited to have this on hand as a reference and to be using this coming year with my kids as kind of a guideline for me of conversations that I want to have with my kids. I do want to be the first one to have these conversations with my kids. I want to be the one to introduce how they think about it, to give them preparation for the world they live in. I know we're homeschoolers, but they have friends and they meet up with people who are public schoolers. Their cousins are some of their cousins go to public school. Like they're going to run into kids who have run into these topics and who are going to introduce these topics to my kids. And I want to have gotten there first. I want to help my kid and not leave them feeling like they don't know what to do with it. I want to prepare them. I do want to come at it from a biblical point of view. And I love the idea of approaching all of this from the goodness of God and his design as creator. And that if you create something, you know the best way to live that life. Like God created this life. He's not giving us all these rules because he hates us and doesn't want us to have fun. He's giving us these rules because this is the best way to live the life he's made. Like this is how you do it best if you want it to be the fullest. And so teaching my children that to understand that these rules are for our good, not because he doesn't love us, not because he hates us or is just strict. Like the way I teach my children, I am teaching them things for their good. And I might feel strict in the moment, but they, I hope, will come to see that the things I'm trying to teach them are because I loved them and because I wanted them to live the fullest and best life. And so I love coming at these topics from that approach. So I hope you find that helpful. I hope this kind of shows you what this book is about. Like I said, I will link this and these both below. I will link Elizabeth Urbanowicz. I'm probably butchering her last name. She's the author of these and the creator of Foundation Worldview website and curriculum. I will link her YouTube channel below because she has a lot of conversations that she talks to parents about similar type topics, but a lot of other topics that are common in our culture and just topics that parents want to talk about. I will link that below, as well as Foundation Worldview website. They actually do have a lot of these as like video lessons for kids that you could listen to alongside with your kids, or that your kids can do on the side. So if you're like, I don't know about having these conversations, they do have some resources that would help you with that. I think these are really good resources, and I'm really glad to have them on hand and to be able to use it with my kids this coming year. If you have any questions, any comments, I would also love to know, what are your favorite resources for teaching these kind of topics to your kids? Do you have something that you've learned like, this has been amazing for us? Comment that below for all of us. And yeah, I hope this is helpful for you guys.